Hey, everybody. It is October 9th, 2025. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu here.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And where we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Welcome back, Jill.
Thank you, Moshe. And just want to wish a very happy birthday to a voice that might be familiar to some of our listeners. My daughter, Alex, turned 7 today.
Alex, happy birthday. Big number 7. Any exciting plans?
You know, the old birthday party, gymnastics place, 30 girls running around.
Good luck to you, Jill.
Thank you, Moshe. And I can honestly say, I know you have a daughter as well, obviously. I think it gets better every year, every day, as they get older and really develop their personality. I just think it gets more fun.
Yeah, well, if the journey from 1 to 2 taught me anything, it is that. I can't wait for what's ahead. I just don't want it to happen too quickly.
All right, let's get to the headlines, starting with a historic agreement in the Middle East. Hamas and Israel have reached a deal that will end the fighting in Gaza and see the release of the remaining Israeli hostages, what we know about it.
And it includes a trip by Trump to the Middle East this weekend, but there is still a lot that the two sides need to come to an agreement on.
Back here at home, the battle over National Guard troops in U.S. cities. The latest on what's happening in Chicago and Portland.
There are a number of court cases we're watching. Judges set to rule today. Jill, it also came as the president threatened to put the mayor of Chicago and governor of Illinois in prison.
Former FBI Director James Comey pleads not guilty in court. Why this case could be a tough one for the government. 9 days and counting, where things stand on the government shutdown, and what it will cost millions of Americans if the Affordable Care Act tax credits at the heart of the shutdown battle really do expire at the end of the year. To the deadly Palisades fire in California, a suspect is now in custody, police using his digital footprint to find him.
It included significant use of ChatGPT as he tried to cover his tracks, but also, Jill, it turns out, left quite a trail for investigators.
Another country looking to ban social media for kids under the age of 15. We'll tell you where. And Dolly Parton setting the record straight on her health. She says she's doing just fine. We'll tell you about her Instagram video and why she felt like she had to make it.
It had to do with her sisters chiming in on her health on social media, Jill. We'll tell you what they initially said, how they corrected themselves, and then what Dolly had to say.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, on this day, a man is kicked out of one American state, and he would go on, because of that, to form his own state. Some of you may know this based on where you live, but we'll tell you which state that was.
Okay, starting with that major breakthrough in the Middle East, where Israel and Hamas have agreed to a deal that will see the release of all the remaining 48 Israeli hostages in exchange for about 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. It is a long-awaited breakthrough that could finally mean an end to the 2-year war in Gaza. President Trump announced the deal on social media, writing, quote, "I am very proud to announce that Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan. This means that all of the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line as the first steps toward a strong, durable, and everlasting peace." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared this a, quote, "great day for Israel." He said his cabinet would convene on Thursday, today, to approve the agreement and, quote, "bring our dear hostages home." Hamas released a statement saying the war is over, thanking President Trump and other mediators, and saying that this is all about Israel following through on the deal, writing, quote, "we call on President Trump and all Arab, Islamic, and international parties to compel the occupation government to fully implement the terms of the agreement and not allow it to evade or delay the implementation of what has been agreed upon." Bottom line, a U.S. official tells Axios, the war in Gaza is over. The hostages will be released 72 hours after the Israeli cabinet approves the deal. Again, that approval expected today. The hostage release is expected to happen by Monday, but could happen this weekend. There are still 48 hostages being held in Gaza. It's believed about 20 are alive. There is some reporting that the 20 hostages, they'll come home right away, but that the remains of some of the hostages who are no longer alive could take a bit longer. And that is because Hamas may not know where those remains are. Moshe, this week marked 2 years since the Hamas attacks on October 7th, murdering 1,200 people in Israel, taking 250 hostage. Israel launched a war on Hamas in response, decimating the terrorist group and also destroying major parts of Gaza. Tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians have been killed, and nearly all Gaza residents have become displaced. So certainly this is welcome news all around. Netanyahu invited Trump to address the Israeli parliament. Trump said earlier on Wednesday that he may travel to the region this weekend, and he is expected to stop in Israel.
Yeah, it looks like this will happen on Sunday as we learn more details late on Wednesday night. We've been seeing the pictures come in from Gaza of people celebrating, as well as in Israel, including in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. This is literally a area that has been devoted to the hostages and the hostage families for more than 2 years now, where the families and loved ones and anyone hoping for them to come home have camped out, held rallies on a weekly basis for 2 years, begging for their loved ones to come home. So certainly joy in Israel after what has been one of the most challenging 2 years in the nation's history, and in Gaza, where again, the territory has been decimated. And there's not a single Gazan you speak to who has not lost a loved one, a home, or a business in this war. So interesting that Trump may head to the region, almost personally supervising the implementation of this deal, Jill, knowing how quickly and how easily things can fall through here. This will be the first trip of his second term in office to Israel. He did visit during his first term in office, though he notably was in the Middle East earlier this year, but didn't stop in Israel. He just visited Arab Gulf countries, which speaks to his overall strategy here, which I'll get to in a second. But overall here, this is a 20-point Trump peace plan. There's an agreement on just a couple of the points here. There's still a lot of work to be done. As we've been telling you, he sent a couple of his most trusted allies and envoys to the region. That's Steve Witkoff, the real estate developer that has effectively become his peace envoy to a number of global conflicts, and Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, husband of Ivanka, who served in a key role during his first term, including as somebody who led the Abraham Accords, which led to an opening of relations between Israel and several Arab nations. Key to this detail were those Arab nations. We're talking about Qatar, Egypt, Turkey. They've effectively been saying now for a couple of weeks, Jill, time's up, Hamas. This is done. They've been putting pressure on the group to end this losing war that began with their attacks on October 7th and has now ended with the decimation of Gaza. And it's interesting when you look at this deal, this is ultimately a bit of what Israel demanded from day one, which is return all the hostages and give up all your arms. You're done here, Hamas. But of course, Hamas decided they would fight to their own near annihilation. Most of the group now, when you look at the fighters, the estimates are from military officials that it's basically just new recruits, that the leadership structure has been completely destroyed from who existed and what existed before the war. And of course, just widespread devastation in Gaza. The suffering of the Palestinian people here through these 2 years of war has been immense. And you have seen growing in recent months agitation and just complete opposition to Hamas, given what the war has wrought. So we will see what happens with part two here of the deal, part two, part three, depending on how many phases they create here of this 20-point plan, because now we get to the more challenging part. What do the final borders look like here? Who manages Gaza? Who's the civilian government in Gaza? Who rebuilds Gaza? Who pays for it? What the Hamas role is in the future of Gaza? When we look at the Trump 20-point plan, there ain't much of a future here for Hamas, including the disarmament of the group. That's something the group has taken issue with. Remember, Hamas launched back in the 80s as an armed group looking to destroy Israel. And this agreement, should they sign on the dotted line to all points, means the end of Hamas as we know it. No more arms, no more fights, no more role in the future of Gaza. So there's a lot to keep an eye on here. And it's been fascinating to watch these details all play out in real time, especially in the past few weeks, Jill. It's interesting that you can put a demarcation point on that Israeli botched strike in Qatar, where they tried to take out those Hamas leaders, that really turned the tables here, reinforced to folks at the White House that they just need to come to a deal. Trump was like, I've had it. End this whole thing. Come up with a comprehensive deal, and let's do this. Trump then, because of the way Israel conducted itself with that strike, got very close to Qatar. What do you guys need? How do we end this thing? It sort of led to, no pun intended, because we're talking about the Middle East, the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Ultimately, let's end this thing. It could escalate further. You've now made, now in the past couple of months, Qatar has become a war zone, right? The Iranians sent missiles their way. Now the Israelis are striking at Hamas leaders. And so ultimately, that led Trump to tell his key folks, Jared Kushner and Witkoff, come up with a comprehensive plan here. Let's get the Arab and Islamic nations on board. And as we told you during the UN, he had this summit where he brought together the largest and most influential Arab and Islamic countries in the world. We're talking Indonesia, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Turkey, Egypt, all on board with this plan, really flipping the script on what has been conventional wisdom in the Middle East for years. And that is the remarkable thing here about Trump. He has pulled off what many American presidents have not been able to pull off, and including on this war, Joe Biden. And it's a remarkable turn of events here. What did he do? Well, he went straight to the Arab countries, said, what do we have in common here? How do we strike some deals here? And not wait for the Israelis and the Palestinians. So it led to, we've seen now a new military alliance between the U.S. and Qatar. There's new weapon sales to the Saudis. Why is that significant? Well, among the few things that everyone agrees to is that Iran is a problem. And Iran has been a huge problem for a decade now. So he isolated the Iranian threat. Obviously, the Israelis and then the U.S. chiming in with their B-2 bombers on the nuclear sites put Iran back several decades in terms of military power and a few years back on their nuclear program. Over the course of this war, we saw the decimation of most of Iran's proxy terror groups in the region, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, totally decimated. And so ultimately you saw that. And then you also saw the sidelining of the other Palestinian entity, the Palestinian Authority, where nearly 90-year-old Mahmoud Abbas sits there in Ramallah, not respected, viewed as widely corrupt by the Palestinian people, viewed as widely corrupt and a problem by the Israelis. And it turns out the Arab countries have had it with him as well. And so ultimately he sidelined Iran, he sidelined Hamas, he sidelined the Palestinian Authority, he struck these deals with the Arab countries, and ultimately was able to come to a deal here. He also, by the nature of his relationship with Netanyahu and the global isolation that Netanyahu and Israel now feel, Trump has the argument, I'm your only best friend left. So you need to do what I need you to do. And we've seen the reports that that strike in Qatar led to a new level of frustration with Netanyahu. And so ultimately he was able to force Netanyahu, given how much Netanyahu needs the U.S. and also what he has promised. He's vowed to Netanyahu, I've been your best friend now. I've been the best president that Israel has ever had in terms of the alliance. So just a remarkable turn of events here, the strategy. Now, we still are in the early stages of this, but given what we've seen unfold here, how quickly it's unfolded, Jill, pretty stunning news on Wednesday night.
And Moshe, all of this happening overnight in the Middle East. It's happening late night by us on Wednesday, but really 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the Middle East. And it was fascinating because it played out in real time. Sources from the region kept saying they're close to a deal. President Trump hinted at it Wednesday afternoon. And then Wednesday evening on live television, Trump was in the middle of an event at the White House. And you could see Secretary of State Marco Rubio handing him a piece of paper. Trump read the note. He said he might need to leave the event early because of developments around the Gaza negotiations. And then the AP had a photo, and you could see what the note said from Marco Rubio. It said a deal was close and that the president needed to approve a Truth Social post so he could be the first to announce it. And the rest is literally history. He made the announcement, and here we are.
Yeah, a great photo there by Evan Vucci, who is an incredible award-winning photographer. He's covered now multiple White Houses, and he took a shot where you could actually read through the paper, and it really gave you a glimpse in front of the cameras as things are unfolding, which is sort of perfect for Trump. I mean, he sort of does everything in front of the cameras anyway, but to see that go down was pretty remarkable. So history unfolding here in the next few days. A lot of people breathing a sigh of relief, but years, if not decades of work are ahead here. A lot of heavy lifting from a number of people in the region. The human toll, hard to quantify. The financial toll, significant. And Jill, as we know, and we've lived long enough to know, there have been previous declarations of peace in the Middle East or mission accomplished, pick your president, pick your moment. We know how these things go, so we'll watch this very closely. But still, just remarkable to watch how this unfolded, how quickly this unfolded, and how, in many cases, a crisis and the combination of military and diplomacy can lead to a solution, and how sometimes these age-old conflicts need creative solutions or new blood or new ideas, or at times a non-traditional way of approaching diplomacy, which is probably the most general way to describe the Trump approach to the Middle East. But ultimately here, it appears to have paid dividends so far.
Okay, now to the escalating fight between several states and the White House over the deployment of troops in American cities against the will of local and state leaders. Lawsuits filed by Illinois and Oregon will be heard today in court. So let's start in Illinois, in Chicago. Nearly 500 National Guard troops arrived at an Army base in Illinois in the last couple of days as part of President Trump's crackdown on crime and violence in the Chicago area. The base is the Elmwood U.S. Army Reserve Center west of Chicago. The Pentagon activated around 200 National Guard troops from Texas and 300 from Illinois for an initial period of 60 days. And that move comes despite Illinois' governor and the mayor of Chicago saying that they are not necessary and that the move is unconstitutional. Now, the deployment came after hundreds of protesters clashed with federal immigration agents in the city over the weekend outside of an ICE detention facility in the Chicago area. And on Wednesday, President Trump ramping up the threats. He wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Chicago mayor should be in jail for failing to protect ICE officers. Governor Pritzker also." Pritzker responded on Wednesday, writing on X, "I will not back down. Trump is now calling for the arrest of elected representatives checking his power. What else is left on the path to full-blown authoritarianism?"
Now, the governor and mayor not accused of specific crimes here, but of course, this is Trump on social media. It appears just after waking up on Wednesday, he decided to write that they should be in jail, frustrated about the situation there. Nonetheless, this is a very concerning statement for a number of folks across the country, including the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago. Mayor Brandon Johnson writing on X yesterday, "This is not the first time Trump has tried to have a black man unjustly arrested. I'm not going anywhere." The governor and the mayor filed a lawsuit on Monday attempting to block Trump from sending National Guard troops into Chicago. A U.S. District Judge, April Perry, said there was a lot to get through, so she temporarily allowed it to take place. But the next hearing is today, where she may rule to potentially block the move. We will watch that hearing very closely. She actually did suggest back on Monday that the government strongly consider, these are her words, pausing the troop deployment until after she can fully hear everything. But she did not order a pause at that point, so they've gone ahead with the Guard deployment. We now expect her to have a more significant ruling on that today, either allowing it to move forward or, again, temporarily blocking it. And it comes as we've been monitoring moves in other places where judges have blocked the administration. One of those places is Oregon. And that's where we got some late-breaking news last night. The state of Oregon, like Illinois, filed a lawsuit to stop the deployment in Portland, and a judge over the weekend twice blocked the administration from deploying first Oregon National Guard, taking over the state National Guard, federalizing it, as well as blocking them from sending in National Guard troops from any other state. Notably, that judge, Karen Immergut in Oregon, is actually a Trump appointee from his first term, but she noted in her ruling that she believed that this move was unnecessary and was not in line with the facts. And she worried in her initial rulings that the government here, the feds, were creating a precedent by which they could send the military into any American city with a very low standard. But the Trump administration appealed that initial ruling, that temporary restraining order, preventing them from sending in any Guard troops, and they got a partial victory last night. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, so they appealed to the higher court, temporarily stayed one of the judge's motions. That had to do with the federalizing of the Oregon National Guard. But the judge's second order regarding not sending in other Guard troops from around the country, that's going to be heard today. So the translation here is the Trump administration won a partial appeal last night and now has the ability, at least for now, to control the Oregon National Guard. So expect moves on that today. And then we will watch to see what this three-judge panel, this Circuit Court of Appeals, does regarding what they can do with other National Guard troops. So multiple cases here. And for those of you who've been asking questions about this, each state is being dealt with differently. California had its lawsuit earlier this year. That's going through the court system. Oregon has its lawsuit. Illinois has its lawsuit. And as we just laid out to you, different judges ruling in different ways. What does that mean? Well, that means, like we've seen in other cases this year, that the Supreme Court will likely have to rule on this and determine how much power the president has. In particular, when it comes to federalizing National Guard troops over the will of a governor. Constitutionally, governors are in charge of their National Guards. And historically speaking, we have seen in very rare cases a president try to take over a state National Guard against the will of a governor. You have to go back to the 1960s, Jill, the civil rights cases, when ultimately a number of southern states were not adopting desegregation measures. And that's where you had presidents like Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy overriding southern state governors and making use of their National Guard troops. So we haven't seen anything like this in 60 plus years. And ultimately, this will come down to judges determining definitions like what is an insurrection, because it appears here very different definitions, right? The judges are saying there have been a few protests, there's been some violence around specific ICE facilities in Portland and Chicago. At least the judge in Oregon, the lower court judge, said that is not an insurrection and is not worthy of a National Guard deployment. The White House saying otherwise here. One thing to keep in mind as these go through the system, one trump card, so to speak, no pun intended, partial pun intended there, the president believes he has, is called the Insurrection Act. This is a law from 1807, yes, nearly 220-year-old law that gives the president emergency powers to deploy troops on U.S. soil to quell rebellion or insurrection. Now, again, it comes down to your definition of rebellion or insurrection. Trump and the Homeland Security authorities say what we're seeing in the area around these ICE facilities and the lack of cooperation with locals, we define as an insurrection. That's why you keep hearing the president use that term. Now, he has not invoked the Insurrection Act. He thought about it in the first term. He was dissuaded from using it by advisors during that time. It appears since then he regrets that move. So he keeps thinking about the Insurrection Act and declaring an insurrection in these various places, though key allies at the White House believe that he would not do that unless he deems it necessary and, of course, loses some of these court cases. And then, of course, there will be court cases, Jill, about the Insurrection Act. So we're watching this back and forth here. So far, I should say, the White House has followed through with the ruling in Oregon, at least the lower court ruling, at least until last night, when the judge said you can't deploy here. They didn't deploy there. And so as we watch this, what's been referred to as a constitutional standoff, we have not seen the White House directly going against specific orders by the judges here. They're trying to find end arounds, and that's what annoyed the judge in Oregon over the weekend. But in terms of specifically going against what they're saying, so far they have followed through there. Nonetheless, this has a number of folks concerned across the country about what precedent could be created here. Reminder again, the White House says this is specifically about guarding ICE officers, immigration officers in these specific cities. The local officials there have said, no, this is about a military takeover and setting a precedent about how you can send the military into American cities. The specific concern, potentially next year's midterms, would the federal government try to deploy the military in various states to try to dissuade voters potentially from coming to vote? Now, the White House has said, get out of here with those allegations. Nonetheless, there is a concern here about the precedent and the line and what is the bar for which the federal government can deploy the military domestically.
All right, time for the speed read, starting in a courtroom in Virginia, which is where the first major prosecution of one of President Trump's political enemies is taking place. This from Politico. Former FBI Director James Comey made his first court appearance Wednesday after being federally indicted late last month. At his arraignment in Virginia, Comey pleaded not guilty to charges of making false statements and obstructing a congressional proceeding. The charges stem from Comey's September 30th, 2020 Senate testimony. During that hearing, Comey told Senate Republicans that he stood by earlier claims that he had never authorized FBI leaks about investigations into then President Trump or former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So this all revolved around the 2016 presidential election. The indictment includes very few details, so it's not clear how much evidence the government has to prove that he did lie during that hearing. A 2018 DOJ Inspector General report said that Comey's deputy, Andrew McCabe, claimed that his boss had authorized him to leak to the media. But that same report also found that McCabe gave false or misleading statements. All of that is to say that this appears to be an extremely challenging case to get a conviction on.
Right. If you're trying to prove that someone lied and your key witness is somebody who's also been proven to give misleading statements and lie in the past, difficult case to prove. Add to that, there's a bit of a mismatch, significant mismatch, when it comes to the legal teams, at least as of right now on both sides of the case. So you have James Comey, former FBI director, former U.S. attorney. He prosecuted numerous cases, including famously the Martha Stewart case. If you've watched that documentary, she has some thoughts about him. And then Comey is being represented by a number of lawyers, including Patrick Fitzgerald. That name might be familiar to a number of you, particularly in Chicago. He's the former U.S. attorney out of Chicago, was there for more than a decade, and that's where he led a number of prosecutions, including former Dick Cheney aide and Bush White House official Scooter Libby. Fitzgerald also took down part of the Chicago mob. He helped put 2 governors in Illinois in prison. One of them, of course, was Rod Blagojevich, but one was a Republican and one was a Democrat. And so he has significant experience prosecuting cases, poking holes in cases from the other side. Then you have who is trying to prosecute Comey here. We've told you about her. Her name is Lindsay Halligan. She's a former Trump defense attorney, former insurance attorney, but she has no prosecutorial experience, hasn't prosecuted a single case in her life. In fact, yesterday's hearing was her second ever appearance as a prosecutor. Her first one was when she rolled out the Comey indictment. She's literally less than 2 weeks into the job. She was installed by the Trump administration after the previous U.S. attorney refused to pursue the Comey case, saying there's not enough evidence here. That upset the White House. He then put Halligan in charge. So ultimately, you're going to have Halligan and Eastern District of Virginia, whoever is there, pursuing the case against Fitzgerald, Comey, and company. The trial has been set for January 5th, so something we'll be closely watching early next year. Comey's lawyers plan to move to dismiss the case, arguing that it's, quote, vindictive and selective prosecution. And they believe the statements President Trump has made, including his Truth Social posts, calling for Comey to be prosecuted, calling him guilty before he was ever indicted, could help them here. They feel confident that ultimately he will be exonerated because, again, proving lying before Congress is difficult on a good day. Add to that all the other evidence they believe they have. But we still don't know the full evidence the government has here. The indictment was very light on details, so we'll wait to hear more on what the government has as far as its case against Comey. And we're watching a number of cases that are widely viewed as very political. There's also the John Bolton case regarding classified documents. And then, of course, President Trump has called for the prosecution of a number of political opponents, including California Democratic Senator Adam Schiff, as well as New York Attorney General Letitia James. Schiff, if you recall, pursued multiple investigations into Trump from his vantage point in the U.S. House, including the impeachments of President Trump. And then you have Letitia James, who pursued the case that she won against Trump businesses last year.
Okay, now to the latest on the government shutdown, which is on day 9 right now from Politico. The Senate rejected dueling government funding bills for the 6th time on Wednesday amid growing frustration over the shutdown stalemate. The back-to-back votes come as there is no sign of a quick off-ramp here, as congressional leaders seem to only be getting further entrenched the longer this funding lapse drags on. Party leaders continue to talk past each other in press conferences, television interviews, and social media posts. The key sticking point is still the Affordable Care Act subsidies set to expire at the end of the year. Democrats want them extended as part of the spending bill. Republicans, though, are solidified in their stance that lawmakers pass this stopgap funding bill that will fund the government for a few weeks, and they will then discuss the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Senate Republican Majority Leader John Thune plans to make the chamber vote as soon as today for the 7th time on both the Republican stopgap and the Democratic alternative, which would run through October 31st and force the Republicans' hand with healthcare concessions and guardrails around spending. It is not expected to pass.
No, the two sides basically talking past each other, having their press conferences, as you mentioned, and ultimately no agreement here. Democrats are looking for some sort of compromise, and Republicans over and over and over again keep saying, no, you must vote to keep the government open. We will make no concessions until you reopen the government, and then we can talk. But of course, Democrats don't trust that. The Democrats' only leverage right now is reopening the government. And right now, polling still shows 1 week in that Americans are more inclined to blame Republicans than Democrats. Also, the issue Democrats are fighting for here, extending healthcare insurance subsidies, happens to be very popular. Americans believe that their healthcare insurance is too expensive. And we did a deep dive on this on Instagram yesterday. And definitely take a look at that post on the studies that have shown now that 22 million Americans will see their health insurance premiums go up next year if these subsidies expire at the end of the year, which they're expected to, unless there's a compromise. Overall, premiums for the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, are expected to more than double next year, from an average of $888 a month to $1,900 a month for the 22 million enrollees in the Affordable Care Act if these enhanced tax credits expire. This is according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, a nonpartisan health policy group. So extending these tax credits are core to this government shutdown debate. And as people start to get their notices right now, because this is set to expire unless something else changes, more and more people are starting to freak out about how much they might have to pay next year. Time, Democrats believe, is on their side here to force a compromise. These tax credits were created back in 2021. They were extended until this December, and they have actually helped enrollment in the Affordable Care Act increase from 11 million to 24 million people, 93% of which receive some form of a tax credit. So this is going to impact a lot of people, including, notably, Jill, a lot of Republicans. It turns out that 6 in 10 enrollees in the Affordable Care Act live in a Republican congressional district. So nearly 60% of the people impacted by this live in red districts. That's again something that Democrats believe will force Republicans to make a concession here. And a reminder that we are starting to see the real world impacts of the government shutdown. We've been talking about airline delays, some of these air traffic control towers that have been closed due to a shortage because of sick outs. Air traffic controllers are deemed essential workers. Among those government workers that need to work without getting paid until after they come back. And so you've seen increasingly a number of them calling out sick. So we will watch the impact get more significant here over time. And no resolution yet, Jill, on the story we told you about yesterday, that the president is saying not everyone who is furloughed will get back pay. Again, there was a law passed a few years ago that said otherwise, but the White House is trying to reinterpret that. So that's another storyline here we're watching.
From the Mo News Substack, federal authorities have arrested a 29-year-old man for intentionally setting the deadly Palisades fire that killed 12 people and destroyed more than 6,000 buildings back in January. Jonathan Rinderknecht is an Uber driver who is formerly a resident of the Pacific Palisades, and he reportedly moved to Florida after the fire this year. He was charged with destruction of property by means of fire after investigators traced the larger Palisades fire back to a smaller fire that he had allegedly set on New Year's Day, known as the Lackman fire. So that fire was contained by local firefighters before the winds reignited it days later. Officials say that they used his cell phone data to pinpoint his location and that he also lied to investigators during questioning. Investigators say Rinderknecht screen recorded his attempts at calling 911 after he allegedly set the fire and then asked ChatGPT, quote, "Are you at fault if a fire is lit because of your cigarettes?" If convicted, he faces 5 to 20 years in federal prison.
So the digital footprint here appears to be significant in terms of how investigators were able to track him, find him, decide that he is the guy at fault here. By the way, that screen recording of the 911 call, apparently that was him trying to create a paper trail to show later that he helped law enforcement, saying, hey, I called 911 on all of this. The problem is the paper trail, or the digital trail here, also shows him asking ChatGPT questions about how to start a fire and who would be guilty depending on the circumstances of how that fire gets started. Add to that, months before the fire, investigators say that the suspect here used ChatGPT to generate an image described by prosecutors as a dystopian painting showing a burning forest and a crowd fleeing from it. It's very detailed, Jill. We posted it on our Instagram page. But clearly he was deeply interested in setting a fire here, obsessed with fires. According to the complaint here, apparently he would listen to a rap song repeatedly in the days preceding the fire that talks about igniting small fires, and there's lyrics about it. And he watched the music video a couple times as well. Some more details here. He'd been working an Uber shift on New Year's Eve. He dropped off a passenger in a residential area of the Palisades just before midnight. 2 other passengers they spoke to said that he had appeared agitated and angry when they rode with him. And apparently he was very familiar with this area. He lived in this area. And then, of course, as you mentioned, would move to Florida after the fire here. So authorities believe they have a pretty good case. Just to back up here, the details of the Palisades fire, thousands of structures and homes impacting tens of thousands of people were destroyed. The fire lasted more than 3 weeks. 12 people were killed in the fire, and it caused an estimated $150 billion in damage.
Overseas from The Guardian, the Danish prime minister says that the country will ban social media for anyone under the age of 15. She's accusing mobile phones and social networks of, quote, stealing our children's childhood. She said to the Danish parliament, "We have unleashed a monster. Never before have so many children and young people suffered from anxiety and depression." She says many children also have difficulty reading and concentrating, also saying that, quote, "on screens, they see things that no child or young person should see." Now, she didn't specify which social networks these new measures would affect, just that it would cover several social media platforms. She says there's also going to be an option for parents who do want to give permission to their children to use social media starting at the age of 13. But that ban is expected to start as early as next year.
So Denmark is not alone here. Australia introduced a ban on social media for platforms like Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube for anyone under 16. Norway said they are enforcing a minimum age limit of 15 on social media, raising it from 13. In June, Greece proposed that the EU set an age of digital adulthood for the entire EU. So we're talking about 30 plus countries. So we'll watch the EU there, but so far individual countries are making moves here. And it comes, of course, as the social media companies like Meta have been trying to prove that they're doing as much as they can to ensure child safety on the platform. They keep the rule at 13. They've created all these new parental limits and protections for 13 to 17-year-olds, but countries appearing to now take things into their own hands.
And finally, from People, Dolly Parton wants fans to know that despite some health problems, she's doing just fine. Parton posted a video on social media with the caption, "I ain't dead yet." The video comes just one day after her sister Frida sparked concern about Parton's health with a Facebook post that encouraged fans to pray for Dolly Parton, saying, quote, "She hasn't been feeling her best lately." Her sister telling fans that she had been, quote, "up all night praying" for the country music star. So Moshe, this, of course, sparked a wave of concern for Dolly Parton. Now, Dolly Parton is 79 years old, and we're going to play a little bit of that video that she had posted onto Instagram. She recorded it on October 8th, and she specifically mentioned the date, I'm sure so that nobody would say, oh, that was recorded earlier.
Right. We live in an era of conspiracy theories here.
So here's a little bit of that video.
Do I look sick to you? I'm working hard here. Anyway, I wanted to put everybody's mind at ease, those of you that seem to be real concerned, which I appreciate. And I appreciate your prayers because I'm a person of faith. I can always use the prayers for anything and everything. But I want you to know that I'm okay.
All right, so this all got started back on September 28th when Dolly announced that she was postponing a number of her Las Vegas residency dates to undergo, quote, a few procedures. She didn't go into detail on what the health issue was, but those were scheduled for December, and they were postponed until next September, leading, of course, a lot of folks to say, wow, there must be something really wrong here. Enter not one, but two of her sisters who decided to post on social media this week. You mentioned Frida. It turns out, by the way, Dolly Parton, I had to be reminded of this, has 6 brothers and 6 sisters. So the 2 sisters here posting about her health, she needed to take control of the conversation yesterday. I imagine her PR people, et cetera, like, you need to get involved here. You need to record this. You need to prove the date to calm people down after your sisters were saying, you need to pray for Dolly. So she did say that some of her health problems, she believes, are linked to her husband's death earlier this year. They were married for more than 60 years. She says that during the time that he was sick and that she was taking care of him, she neglected her own health. So she needs to see some doctors to take care of some things. Again, still not that much specificity, but it did look like Dolly at least is doing okay at home there in that video she released yesterday. And so, Jill, we're still praying for Dolly to live as long as humanly possible here on the Mo News podcast.
She is a national treasure, Moshe, especially the way things are in the world. Although we do have a Middle East peace deal, I'm still not ready to give up on Dolly Parton.
No, Jill, if anyone listens to the rest of this podcast, it's like 2025. Can you leave Dolly alone? Thank you. Now time for On This Day in History. Beginning in 1635 on this day, a man named Roger Williams is banished from the Massachusetts Bay Colony by the General Court of Massachusetts. He had spoken out against the confiscation of Native American land. This is early in the 17th century, so he was way ahead on this stuff. He also was speaking out about the separation of church and state. The Massachusetts Bay Colony says, get out of here, Roger. So he leaves, and with the assistance of the Narragansett tribe, he establishes a new settlement. It would turn into Rhode Island. So they kick out Roger Williams from Massachusetts, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to create my own state. We're calling it Rhode Island. Jill, which reminds me of the line from SNL in the early 90s. Remember the Mike Myers character, Linda Richmond, Coffee Talk?
Of course.
You know, he'd throw out something, he's like, discuss. So this line was, at least I remember this from Coffee Talk in the early 90s. Rhode Island is neither a road nor an island. Discuss.
It works for anything. I think I'm going to start using that on this podcast, actually.
Coffee Talk lines? Or
just discuss.
Discuss. Moshe, go ahead.
Moshe,
discuss.
Day 9 of a shutdown. Healthcare subsidies. Will they expire? Discuss.
It would create much less work and preparation, Jill. We'll continue here with On This Day in History. On this day in 1888, the Washington Monument opened to the public for the first time. The obelisk honors, of course, our first president, George Washington. And it came at a time in the late 1800s, Jill, when we were obsessed with ancient Egypt. A lot of discoveries were coming out of Egypt. So, of course, to honor our first president, we're like, what better way to honor our first president in the United States than an obelisk for George Washington? Jill, as I've told you, as they considered a monument for another president, Abraham Lincoln, one of the final designs on the National Mall, just, a few hundred yards away from the Washington Monument, was to build a pyramid for Abraham Lincoln. That's how obsessed with Egypt we were. We almost built a pyramid on the National Mall in Washington. Of course, they would go with, what ultimately they went with, the more Greek-oriented temple to honor Abraham Lincoln. But there were those hoping to have both a pyramid and an obelisk there on the National Mall. Fast forward, on this day in 1999, the inaugural Coachella Festival opened for the first time. You had bands like Beck and Rage Against the Machine perform. We should note the next Coachella is set for next April 2026. On this day in 2009, they gave Barack Obama the Nobel Peace Prize just 9 months into his presidency. They said for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. He'd only been president for 9 months. There were people at the White House being like, do not give him the Nobel Peace Prize. He has done nothing. It's going to be sort of embarrassing for us to have to explain. But the Nobel Committee, so enamored with Obama, they said, no, we're giving him the Peace Prize, even though he hasn't really done that much. It's more of an aspirational Peace Prize. The head of the Nobel Committee would later admit that was a mistake. One of the reasons why Trump is so eager to get the Peace Prize, he's like, I've done way more than Obama did when he got his Peace Prize. And finally, on this day in music history, on this day in 2000, 25 years ago today, U2 released their song, Beautiful Day.
We'll hope everyone has a beautiful day. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Welcome back, Jill. We'll see everyone back here tomorrow.
Thank you. Listen to Mo News in the App.